After Prime Minister Narendra Modi attended the Bastille Day parade in Paris as a guest of honor last year, the French President Emmanuel Macron has now arrived in the pink city of Jaipur. He shall be gracing the Republic Day parade celebrations at Kartavya Path. This visit is crucial as it celebrates 25 years of India-France defence cooperation. In line with this, bilateral discussions regarding defence and inking of key deals also is expected. Additionally, India and France are also looking at augmenting the scope of bilateral trade and collaborations in the space sector. And of course, what's truly interesting about this time-tested partnership is that it is based on mutual respect. France has been a steadfast European ally of India and has not needled us in our internal affairs. In the same manner, India has also shown the same to the French. This brings us to the crucial question: is a pivot towards maintaining close ties with the French a bid to purge the last lingering tentacles of the Raj as well? Also, you can see there these visuals on your screen. Visuals, of course, from Jaipur of a cultural tour that Emmanuel Macron got today. The fact that Prime Minister Modi spent a lot of time with this on this tour also says a lot about the regard and the bonhomie between the two leaders. Also, a roadshow that the two participated in as well. You can see there the swarms of people that lined up the streets of Jaipur to catch a glimpse of PM Modi and also welcome Emmanuel Macron to India. Rashmi Samant, human rights defender, is joining us live. We also have Madhav Nalapat, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, joining us live. Pramit Pal Chaudhary, senior journalist, also is on the broadcast with us. Let me begin with you first, Professor Nalapat, on the larger picture on ties between the two nations. Where do things stand currently, and where do you expect the ties to head post this visit? Okay, I think we've lost Professor Nalapat's connection there. Let me try and bring in Pramit Pal Chaudhary for his take. Pramit, how important is this visit for Indo-French relations? Which direction will ties between our two countries head post this visit by Macron to India?
You keep in mind that this was effectively an emergency invitation. As you know, the original plan was for the U.S. President Joe Biden to come as Republic Day guest and to have that followed by a Quad summit. Unfortunately, Biden, given the difficulties of his U.S. presidential election rebid, especially with the rise of a return of Donald Trump, decided he couldn't really afford to come to India in January. And it was interesting that Macron, the French, saw it as perfectly acceptable on their part to accept and take a last-minute invitation from India to fill in that slot. And it's a sign of how important the French take their relationship. There are a few other countries where a president or a prime minister would accept that this is something that he would be prepared to do. See, the French, I would argue, are strategically the most important European partner that India has right now. There is no other European country that comes close because on a number of fronts. One, France has always taken an extremely independent foreign policy from the rest of the West. It has been very careful historically never to denounce India, whether it was for nuclear tests. It does not talk about the internal politics of India. It does not see any of these as being something France works with. It is the only European nation that has a presence, a military presence in the Indian Ocean. It has an entire naval flotilla. It has about 1 million French citizens. Of all the Europeans, when it says it has an Indo-Pacific strategy, it is the only one that it genuinely has the ability to do so. And then, of course, it has by far the most vibrant defense relationship that we have, literally with any other Western country. We have obviously a Russian one, but that's declining right now. And we have one with Israel. But France, both in terms of fighter aircraft, submarines, and a whole host of other weapon systems, France has been consistently our primary defense and security partner in the West. It remains the most dependable, even though it has some limitations of how much it can do for us. We have also a reasonably good trade relationship. While official French and Indian figures on FDI are only about $5 or $6 billion, if you were to include French investments that were raised capital from within the Indian stock market or did not import capital from France, for example, got it from their own banks and stuff in India, French investment would be almost $30 billion in this country, which would be is considerable by any country's definition. And finally, politically, it is the most, even more now so than Russia, it is the most secure Security Council veto for India. It is our most certain voice within the European Union. It is a strong supporter in whether it is a G20 or the G7 for almost anything India does. The only country that is now beginning to rival France is the United States, but that's a much more recent development. France has a record of doing so that goes back decades. And that's very important in foreign policy. It's the stability of the relationship that is remarkable with France. And the fact that France, no matter who comes to power, no matter which government is in power, whether in India or France, the policy remains exactly the same.
Yes, let me take that across to Rashmi Samant as well. Rashmi, the entire red carpet welcome, of course, that has been given to Emmanuel Macron speaks volumes of the relationship that India and France share currently, and also the bonhomie between the two leaders, isn't it? I think day one is an example of that. Day two, of course, will be the business end of the visit.
Well, I think, Uday, ever since Brexit, the UK has really lost its position in the world stage as an ally. You can see that even the US speaks more to France and is closer to France in that sense, that they see it more as a representative and as a spokesperson of the entire EU. So there's that shift which has happened ever since the UK left EU, and I think that signals to a beneficial sort of collaboration as well with France. I mean, everybody gains to be closer to France because it's then the gateway to all of Europe, and they've managed to kind of lead that entire delegation in terms of foreign interactions. Secondly, I think the panelists before me quite rightly elucidated how France has never really poked their nose into the internal affairs of India and, tried to rake up issues that they have no jurisdiction whatsoever, be it in their parliament or in, any state-sponsored sort of news outlets. I think we're all very privy to what the BBC, sponsored by the United Kingdom as a state, continues to say about Bharat and its progress and its internal affairs, which is quite concerning as a country. But France, on the other end, has never, done anything of that sort, despite the fact that the person in power represents a more liberal faction of the political spectrum in France and not the conservative side. Despite that, they've always had warm relations with India and really not tried to poke much into the internal affairs like other governments have, based on what end of the spectrum, political spectrum, they represent in their respective countries. So I think that's a really positive sign. And of course, we do need strong partnerships with countries around the world. It's a global world, really. And France has stepped up, especially by accepting a last minute invite. That too, it has, really stepped up to that role and is stepping up to be an ally we can actually count on the world stage.
What has led this, India to pivot to France in this extremely close manner, Professor Nalapat? Which direction do you believe ties between the two countries will head post this latest visit of Emmanuel Macron?
Well, the French have always been a very proud people. And you will recall, even in the Second World War, when much of that country was occupied by Germany, de Gaulle maintained the honor of position, and certainly the American position. You saw that in Jacques Chirac. The fact is that the French were the most understanding of the Indian nuclear tests in 1998. They understood the fact that we are in a very dangerous neighborhood and we have two nuclear powers actually on either side. One a proxy nuclear power created artificially by the other nuclear power, and they were very muted in their criticism. The French reaction with that of the Canadians, Australians, or the Americans, Clinton was absolutely hysterical about the Indian nuclear test. He seems to forget that we are a democracy. He forgot that we are a democracy. He forgot that we have a nuclear-armed neighbor who has basically fought wars with us, and which is accumulating weapons at a very fast rate. All that was forgotten. So the French have always been different, and Macron has kept up this difference in France. He has maintained an independent French policy in a way which Jacques Chirac, for example, before that did. And if I may say so, both of them have gone for the example of Charles de Gaulle, who was to the end a very, very proud Frenchman. Yes, the French may have had their losses in the war, in the Second World War in the beginning, but de Gaulle always maintained the honor and dignity of France. And I think in that sense, Macron also is maintaining the honor and dignity of France. And Macron, frankly, is a very, very shrewd person. He knows the importance of India. He knows the importance of Prime Minister Narendra Modi in India. And he knows that India and the West need to work together. So that is why he has been an honored guest. And I'd like to say he's the ideal guest, the perfect guest, if I may say so. And the reason is, more than many other leaders in the NATO alliance, he understands the future of the world much better. He understands the centrality of India being friendly with the West in whatever outcomes come in this new Cold War that is starting out. And proof of that is the fact that he so warmly accepted the invitation by his very close friend, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and is today a very honored guest. And frankly, this has cemented France's position as the most trusted and reliable power in Europe for India. It's not Germany, it's not Britain, it's France. That's the most reliable and trusted European partner of India.
And do you believe that's something that perhaps will continue? There will be further convergence? Which are the sectors, the areas, Professor Nalapat, in which there will be further convergence?
Well, I'd like to say that one sector the French have been very active is in defense. The other has been, of course, in diplomatic policies, etc. And the third has been basically in promoting joint diplomacy in so many initiatives. You've got so many, for example, on energy, on environment, on very many issues, the French and the Indians have have basically been on the same page. So I think you have a lot of fields in which India and France have been linked together, and those are going to continue. And not the least of this would be, for example, cooperation in space. Now, the reality of the situation is NASA wants to cooperate in space with India, but the Biden administration is so riddled with pro-China elements and pro-Wahhabi elements that it's being constrained in its diplomacy to India, and it makes zigs and zags. In the case of Macron, there is no zigzag. There's only a straight line.
Absolutely. Let me, in fact, quickly now also bring in Pramit Pal Chaudhary back into the conversation. Pramit, now there are going to be talks tomorrow between the two leaders. What all will be on the table? Which will be the focus areas? Of course, defense will be one. What else?
Well, the defense will definitely be a very large element of that, because we will be, what we're seeing in effect is on the defense side, if you can say, France positioning itself as the new Russia. Why do I say that? Russia, partly because of its the sanctions regime, partly because of its own declining technological capacities, and partly because it hasn't kept up with the new sort of weapon systems that are required, is no longer able to provide us. For example, we were looking at nuclear hunter attack submarines, the Akula class. They simply can't build them anymore because of the sanctions that have hit them. They cannot. We saw that their MiG-29 naval carrier aircraft is simply was not up to the standards that were required by us. Um, and so on. And you see the French are really the only Western country. The only other country that comes close in that field is America, but on, let's say, nuclear submarines, they provide that to nobody, not even their closest allies. So therefore, it's really only France. So on the defense side, it's not just a question of us buying weapons. It's a question that India is saying we now need to start making these to a large extent in India, and France saying, okay, let's figure out, the two sides now trying to work out how this is going to sort itself out. Second part is the nuclear power story. France, as you know, is a maker of some of the most advanced nuclear reactors, but they make very large ones and very expensive ones. And what the future really requires, what India is going down, is small modular reactors, because that is really what we need to produce cheap green residential power, as we move to green hydrogen is being used for heavy industry. We've already signed SMR deals with a number of other countries. Again, Russia is simply not on the table, even though we've bought more reactors from them than from any other country. So France is not the only country, Japan, the United States, Britain, but it is one of the first countries that we would obviously turn to, given their nuclear record, for assistance. And again, it's a place where there can be co-production and co-development. France needs assistance as well, particularly needs a market for these things. So it's, I think, an area where we'll also see some forward movement. And I think that what we'll start to see as the question is, and this is why the Indo-Pacific is important. France is still trying to work out, if you wish, how it can respond to China. Partly it already has strong economic interests in China, but it recognizes, probably more so than many other European countries, definitely more so than, let's say, Germany, the threat that China poses economically and technologically. They need to find other markets and other partners in Asia to work with. Asia, for the most part, the most advanced countries are largely American allies. India is the odd man out. Yes, we're close to the United States, but we're definitely not an ally, and we're prepared to work with other countries. So for France, if they have an Indo-Pacific strategy, India is the obvious partner, partly because they are largely an Indian Ocean power. They have a mild presence in the Pacific, but they're really an Indian Ocean power. So this strategic element needs to be fleshed out more. And I think that's going to be a key element. That is always an element, and when we talk to the French, and it'll be an element in this case as well.
Yes, no doubt. Rashmi, Samant, come in here, and of course also, and even as we continue to see these pictures coming in, these visuals, of course, of the roadshow that continues between Prime Minister of Narendra Modi and, of course, French President Emmanuel Macron. Let me quickly bring you in here, Rashmi, and of course also now, the fact is that in this changed geopolitical world of today, it's very important to have solid defense. And defense partnership has been something that we have worked on significantly with France, isn't it?
I do agree with that. I think sharing technology is something that we've done historically, and now with some of our allies falling off the boat, I think it's necessary that we build on this with France. And France has been more than forthcoming. Even when it comes to SMRs, as the panelists pointed out earlier, I think France is there with the technology. At least when I was pursuing my master's in energy systems from Oxford, there were so many companies from France that had come in, really discussing all of the technology that's come up. And that's something, they're out there with it and they're more willing to share. And they've demonstrated that as a country as well. They do rely on nuclear power, more so than other EU countries when others did shy away from it. And that sets up the stage for something India can do and share with France in the future. Even when it comes to defense, it's a great strategic partnership to share technology, also to purchase a lot of these arms and that we don't have the technology for, but also look at maybe being partners in developing something in the future. Because two of our strongest allies from the past are really under the fire now, be it Israel or Russia. They have their own issues to deal with. Russia is not, I mean, I think they're kind of losing the momentum there, but Israel really has a lot to deal with on its own. And under these circumstances, France does come up as the ideal ally. I think this visit really signifies a lot. And another aspect that I'd like to add, Uday, is how France has dealt with extremism. And I think that is something that India and France are on the same page on. They've never apologized about dealing with extremism. And they've stood up to, in fact, many people trying to boycott them as well. And I think that is something that India and France has in common with in the fundamental way that they deal with extremism. So I think it's two countries with similar philosophies and can go a long way in terms of partnerships for common growth and benefits in the future.
Yes, and the fact that this roadshow is actually happening today, and this red carpet welcome shows, of course, the bonhomie, doesn't it, between Modi and Macron. Professor Nalapat, and the fact that Macron is enthusiastically participating in it. This kind of experience is limited to very, very special friends of India in particular, isn't it?
Look, Uday, you judge a friend not by honeyed words or by occasional parties that he may throw for you, but you judge a friend 24/7, 30 days in a month, 31 days, where the month is 31 days. And a steady friend is the most valuable friend. The President Macron has shown that he's an extremely valuable and trusted friend. And his presence in India and the Republic Day parade, quite frankly, it's an honor for India in the sense for having France, because France in Europe represents the ideal of liberty and equality. And it's an honor for France to be invited by India, because India has had the democratic institutions for a very long time, and India is at one time about the only democracy in this part of the world, and that democracy has continued. There have been some brief periods in which that democracy was under fire, but it's always revived. So frankly, both these countries, with their love for liberty, their love for equality, their love for democracy, have come together. And about equality, let me say that India has made a very, very special effort to ensure that all levels of society are given this kind of advantage, if I may say so, to try and to be better. In the past, you saw that the people were neglected. They remain neglected. But now they are being empowered and they are being encouraged to basically break through all the barriers that have confronted them in the past. So from that point of view, the French in Europe are a great exemplar of social progress. Asia is a great exemplar of social progress. So I think it's a very, very ideal situation in which the leaders of these two great democracies have come together. One, a great democracy in Europe, the other, a great democracy in Asia. And I think it also shows that both President Macron and Prime Minister Modi understand the need for these two continents to work together in a way, I'm sorry to say, Rishi Sunak or David Cameron does not. And certainly Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken do not.
Yes, absolutely. Let me leave a quick last word to Pramit Pal Chaudhary on what you expect tomorrow, Pramit, and the way ahead now, the road ahead.
I expect a lot of bonhomie. As you know, Macron will be also making visits to other parts of India, to Jaipur in particular. There'll be a tour. We'll see some business announcements, but we will also see some major, sometimes they're not announced in the Republic Day thing, but what we will see follow up will almost certainly be the agreement on a naval aviation agreement, the 3 Scorpene submarines. possibly a few other deals. But I'm hoping really for some forward-looking announcements. I think particularly in strategic technologies, nuclear, perhaps things like AI and so on, because those are really where India is trying to forge future relationships. Space is another area where the French are also particularly good. And these are the areas we should be, I hope we'll be seeing something. Time is the primary constraint. Normally these take a while to put together. And of course, this trip was done very quickly. But nonetheless, I expect forward-looking language, which will be followed by agreements that will come up in the few months that follow afterwards.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.